BBA 104 Indian Ethos and Business Ethics. Unit 15 Modern Business Ethics and Dilemmas, Environmental Ethics, Concerns and Issues. First, let's talk about modern business ethics and dilemmas. We have discussed this topic in detail in the previous units. So, here we will be brushing upon just the important topics for once again. Business ethics, the system of moral and ethical beliefs that guides the values, behaviors, and decisions of a business organization and the individual within the organization is also known as business ethics. Ethics in leadership, the management team sets the tone for how the entire company runs on a day to day basis. When the prevailing management philosophy is based on ethical practices and behavior, leaders within an organization can direct employees by example and guide them in making decisions that are not only beneficial to them as individuals but also to the organization as a whole. Employee ethics. When management is leading an organization in an ethical manner, employees follow in those footsteps. Employees make better decisions in less time with business ethics as a guiding principle. This increases productivity and overall employee morale. When employees complete work in a way that is based on honesty and integrity, the whole organization benefits. Ethics vary by industry. Business ethics differ from industry to industry. The nature of a business's operation has a major influence on the ethical issues with which it must contend. Now let's talk about environmental ethics. Environment is the hottest topic of discussion as over a long period of time we have been over consuming the resources that has been provided by our planet, which has caused some great concerns and attention areas that have sprung up everywhere. We are looking at seasons changing patterns, we are looking at icebergs melting, glaciers melting. All these things are not happening suddenly or in a snap. It has been our constant ignorance and efforts towards ruining our environment. Yes, we can say it has been our efforts towards ruining our environment. Because if we had been conscious, we would have stopped making those mistakes over and over again and tried to fix the problems that have been created. It has become such a great issue that now, as academicians and as practitioners, we have come up with something called environmental ethics. Now, what does environmental ethics talk about? Environmental ethics is a branch of philosophy that explores the moral and ethical dimensions of human interactions with the natural world. It seeks to address fundamental questions about the value of nature, our responsibilities toward the environment, and the ethical principle that should guide our interactions with ecosystems, species, and natural resources. Environmental ethics is concerned with developing a framework for making ethical decisions that promote environmental sustainability, conservation, and the well being of both human and non human entities. Let's talk about the key concepts in environmental ethics. Intrinsic value of nature. Environmental ethics challenges the traditional and anthropocentric, human centered view by proposing that nature has intrinsic value, meaning it possesses inherent worth and deserves respect and consideration regardless of its utility to humans. This perspective recognizes that nature has value beyond its usefulness to humans and should be preserved for its own sake. Second, holism and ecosystem ethics. Environmental ethics emphasizes that interconnectedness of all living beings and ecosystems. It argues that ethical consideration should extend beyond individual species to encompass entire ecosystems, recognizing the importance of maintaining ecological balance and diversity. anthropocentrism versus biocentrism versus ecocentrism. Different ethical perspectives exist within environmental ethics. Anthropocentrism prioritizes human interest and well being. Biocentrism extends intrinsic value to all living organisms. And ecocentrism focuses on the well being of ecosystems as a whole. These perspectives influence how we approach environmental issues and ethical dilemmas in the concerned area. Fourth, sustainability and future generations. Environmental ethics emphasizes the moral responsibility to ensure that the natural world is preserved for future generations. It advocates for sustainable practices that do not compromise the ability of future generations to meet their needs. Environmental justice. This concept addresses the disproportionate burden of environmental harm borne by marginalized communities. Environmental ethics advocates for equitable distribution of environmental benefits and burdens, and the recognition of social and environmental justice as integral to ethical decision making. Deep ecology and eco spirituality. Deep ecology is a philosophical perspective that promotes a spiritual connection and reverence for all life forms. It encourages a shift in consciousness and values to foster a harmonious relationship with the natural world. Conservation and preservation. Environmental ethics considers differing approaches to resource management. Conservation focuses on responsible use and management of natural resources, while preservation emphasizes protecting wilderness areas and ecosystem from human interference. Ethical considerations in technology. Advances in technology raise ethical questions about the impact of activities such as genetic engineering, biotechnology, industrial practices on the environment and biodiversity, climate change, and global ethics. Environmental ethics addresses the global challenge of climate change and the ethical responsibilities of individuals, governments, and industries to mitigate its impact and promote sustainable practices. So, none of us are unaware of the side effects of our activities on the environment. What environmental ethics trying to talk about is it wants to question everybody on the activities they are performing which is causing further harm. Now, if we start questioning that, we will start conserving or preserving whatever is left over on the planet. Conserving would be the word as explained below, as conservation focuses on responsible use and preservation emphasizes on protecting wilderness areas. So, environmental laws try to do that. They try to conserve with what is left. Because even if we start today, we might be able to fix some of the issues that we have created. And we have to start immediately because the planet cannot tolerate or contain any more damage that will happen to it. It has provided us with so many resources despite of the fact that we are ruining it bit by bit. And once we have crossed that threshold, the threshold of nature accepting our mistakes, we will be left with nothing. We will be hampering the environment with in terms of the weather, climate will change, in terms of the seasons, availability of food, drinking water, multiple other things. We might even have cities drowned in water with the increasing water levels. There are a lot of initiatives that have been taken on the global level, like our G20 summit this year, which focuses on SDGs. SDG talks about sustainable development goals. Now, what does sustainable development means? Sustainable development means that in today's time, if we are using any resources, we should not try to engage in consumerism and limit our consumption. With this, we will be able to leave something for the future generations. There is a huge difference between how we are operating in this world and how we are planning our future generations. The kind of consumption that we are indulging in does not seem to be leaving much for the next generations, and thus we should either stop recreating, because if we are procreating, then we have to leave something for their survival. Otherwise, we will be creating a world so scarce of resources that maybe our next generation just ends up in fights and in competition for what is existing. Is that what we envision for our future generations? Is that what we wish them to witness? That all of them are fighting over food or water or just even clean air. So we have to need to start today to protect our environment, to ensure that we have something left for the future generation. And that is what we say call as sustainable development. Now let's talk about the biggest environmental hazard that we have created, or a problem that we have created: climate change. Climate change refers to long term shift in temperatures and weather patterns. Such shifts can be natural due to changes in the sun's activity or large volcanic eruptions. But since the 1800s, human activities have been the main driver of climate change, primarily due to the burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas. Burning fossil fuels generate greenhouse gas emissions that act like a blanket wrapped around the earth, trapping in the sun's heat and raising temperature. The main greenhouse gases that are causing climate change include carbon dioxide and methane. These come from using gasoline for driving a car or coal for heating a building. For example, clearing land and cutting down forests can also release carbon dioxide. Agriculture, oil and gas operations are major sources of methane emissions. Energy, industry, transport, buildings, agriculture, and land use are among the main sectors of causing greenhouse gases. So, greenhouse gas effect is directly causing climate change. To avoid this to happen or to reduce the carbon emissions, a Copenhagen summit that had happened on environmental issues in the world, every country was sanctioned a limit of carbon footprint. Now, how does this help? If each country will start to reduce their carbon footprint, together as a whole, as a world, we will come down and we might be able to conserve the planet for our future generations, or even for us to keep consuming the resources in the way that we do. Other environmental problems are global warming from fossil fuels. The last time carbon dioxide levels of our planet were as high as today was more than 4 million years ago. Increased emissions of greenhouse gases have led to a rapid and steady increase in global temperatures, which in turn is causing catastrophic events all over the world. From Australia and the US experiencing some of the most devastating bushfire seasons ever recorded, locusts swamping across parts of Africa, the Middle East and Asia decimating crops, and a heat wave in Antarctica that saw temperature rises above 20 degrees Celsius for the first time. Now, the examples that we have just discussed do not seem like activities that would happen regularly in these regions. Next, poor governance. According to economists like Nicholas Stern, the climate crisis is a result of multiple market failures. Economists and environmentalists have urged policymakers for years to increase the price of activities that emit greenhouse gases, one of our biggest environmental problems. The lack of which constitutes the largest market failure. For example, through carbon taxes, which will stimulate innovations in low carbon technologies. So, if we would become more strict on carbon emissions, we can find out people might have feel the zeal to develop technologies which have low carbon emissions. and that can automatically help us in reducing carbon emissions and reducing the bad side effects of environmental problems. Next point, food waste. A third of the food intended for human consumption, around 1.3 billion tons, is wasted or lost. This is enough to feed 3 billion people. Food waste and loss account for a third of greenhouse gas emissions annually. If it was a country, food waste would be third highest emitter of greenhouse gases behind China and the US. Next point, biodiversity loss. The past 50 years have seen a rapid growth of human consumption, population, global trade, and urbanization, resulting in humanity using more of the earth's resources than it can replenish naturally. Next, plastic pollution. A report by Journal Nature determined that currently roughly 14 million tons of plastic make their way into the oceans every year, harming wildlife habitats and the animals that live in them. The research found that if no action is taken, the plastic crisis will grow to 29 million metric tons per the year 2040. If we include microplastics in this, sorry, the cumulative amount of plastic in the ocean could reach 600 million tons by 2040. Next problem, deforestation. Every hour, forests the size of 300 football fields are cut down. By the year 2030, the planet might only have 10% of its forest if deforestation isn't stopped. They could all be gone in less than 100 years. Air pollution. One of the biggest environmental problems today is outdoor air pollution. Data from the World Health Organization shows that an estimated 4.2 to 7 million people die from air pollution worldwide every year, and that 9 out of 10 people breathe air that contains high levels of pollutants. In Africa, 258,000 people died as a result of outdoor air pollution in 2017, up from 164,000 in 1990 according to UNICEF. Causes of air pollution mostly comes from industrial sources and motor vehicles, as well as emissions from burning biomass and poor air quality due to dust storms. Melting ice caps and sea level rise. The climate crisis is warming the Arctic Ocean more than twice as fast as anywhere else on the planet. Today, sea levels are rising more than twice as quickly as they did for most of the 20th century. And as a result of increasing temperatures on Earth, seas are now rising on an average of 3.2 mm per year globally, and they will continue to grow up to 0.7 meters by the end of this century. In the Arctic, the Greenland ice sheet poses the greatest risk of for sea levels because melting land ice is the main cause of rising sea levels. Ocean acidification. Global temperature rise has not only affected the surface, but it is the main cause of ocean acidification. Our oceans absorb about 30% of carbon dioxide that is released into Earth's atmosphere as higher concentrations of carbon emissions are released, thanks to human activities such as burning fossil fuels, as well as efforts of global climate change such as increased rates of wildfires. So do the amount of carbon dioxide that is absorbed back into the sea. Food and water insecurity. Rising temperatures and unsustainable farming practices has resulted in the increasing threat of water and food insecurity and taking the mantle as one of the biggest environmental problems today. Fast fashions, Fast fashion and textile waste. The global demand for fast fashion clothing has risen at an unprecedented rate that the fashion industry now accounts for 10% of global carbon emissions, becoming one of the biggest environmental problems of our time. Fashion alone produces more greenhouse gas emissions than both the aviation and shipping in sectors combined. And nearly 20% of global wastewater, or around 93 billion cubic meters from textile dyeing, according to the UN Environment. Next, social degradation. Organic matter is a crucial component of soil as it allows to absorb carbon from the atmosphere. Plants absorb CO2 from the air naturally and effectively through photosynthesis, and part of this carbon is stored in the soil as soil organic carbon. Healthy soil has minimum 3 to 6% of organic matter. However, almost everywhere in the world, the content is much lower than that. With this, we have reached the end of this unit. In fact, the end of this syllabus. This was the last unit that we had covered. We hope that you have been able to understand the core ideologies, the basic curriculum from this from these video lectures. You will also have supporting reading material for better understanding and detailed pointers than the presentation. Still, if there are any doubts, you will always have some designated faculty member to help and clarify your doubt. Thank you.